Listed firms here in Singapore could be subject to mandatory climate reporting by the year 2025. It's among proposals set out by the National Business Registry and the bourse's regulatory arm to align with international standards. A public consultation exercise is ongoing. Now, some examples of climate reporting are carbon emissions and exposures to environmental risks. The idea is for listed firms to take the lead. Then, in 2027, non-listed ones drawing in at least 1 billion Sing dollars annually will have to make their sustainability disclosures public as well. This isn't new. Firms in industries like finance, agriculture and transportation, they already publish climate reports. Those that don't can simply explain why they haven't done so. But there will be no excuse for all companies under the proposal. And that's why it's so economically significant. If it takes off, Singapore could very well be the first country in Asia to set standards for non-listed firms. Now, the committee behind this scheme says that it can help businesses capture growth opportunities.
Sustainability reporting help companies to identify goals, gaps, and also strategize, map out plan for improvement. And most importantly, also to track performance and share and report to the major stakeholders, including investors and multi-stakeholders.
Singapore's central bank says it fully supports this, and it adds that financial and corporate institutions must work together to develop robust sustainability reporting and help the economy's climate transition. For more, we're joined by Associate Professor Kelvin Law from NTU's Nanyang Business School. Good evening. Would you please
thank you for having me here.
Yes, yeah. Hi. Thank you for joining us this evening, first off. But would you say, Prof, that the standards or metrics of these reports should perhaps be more stringent for bigger companies? After all, they should bear more responsibility perhaps for their higher carbon footprints.
Yeah, so I agree that larger companies have a more significant environmental impact. And there are two things to think about here. First, larger companies have more resources, right? So therefore, they could potentially start reporting climate change disclosure earlier than the smaller companies, because smaller companies may need additional preparation time. These seems to be already factored into the consultation paper, as smaller companies are given extra time to comply. The consultation paper also mentioned that whether small companies need to comply or not is still up for review in the coming years. Second, the objective of the climate change disclosure isn't to require larger companies to report more metrics, but to ensure that all companies, whether they are large or small, report the same data metrics. Let's think about it as a doctor checking the health of a different patient, right? It doesn't matter whether the patient is a professional athlete or someone less active. The doctor needs to check the same key health metrics like heart rate, blood pressure, cholesterol level in both cases. The difference in lifestyle or fitness level doesn't change the importance of these standard health checks. The same applies to the companies, large or small. We need a consistent, standardized set of measures to truly understand, to compare the environmental impacts.
So the recommendations are calling for mandatory climate reporting for all companies, whether they're listed and also for large non-listed companies. Do you think that there may be any resistance? I mean, in what way might these companies not be on board with this idea?
Yeah, so I can see potentially there are three obstacles here, right? The first one is the costs. Climate change reporting requires additional resources and data gathering to compile the information, and business, especially SMEs, might express concern about the additional costs. However, for the non-listed companies required to report climate change disclosure, the consultation paper suggests a revenue threshold of at least 1 billion per year. So basically, these are large firms. For this company, the consultation paper has compiled the international evidence to support the cost for the climate change reporting is typically quite low. It's about 0.1% of the revenue for a company with at least 1 billion revenue. So how about those companies with revenue between 100 million and 1 billion? So the consultation paper actually mentioned there will be a review in 2027 to decide if these companies need to comply with the climate change disclosure. So for SME, there's less immediate concern right now. The second obstacle, I think, is the expertise. I think the question is like, where the companies can find people with experience in sustainability reporting. By coincidence, I moderate a webinar on Tuesday with panelists from Comfort Del Gro, Aqua, and Deloitte. Everyone was excited about the future job opportunities in sustainability reporting because it is hard to find good people with sustainability experience. I think many universities in Singapore, including ours, are revamping the courses to incorporate sustainability. So I'm optimistic that over time, there will be increased supply of professionals with sustainability experience.
So
I think the last one is transparency. Yeah. Last one is transparency. Yeah. Companies may fear the revealing nature of this climate change report, but if they don't do it, they might just risk losing investor, consumers, or even have a higher cost of capital. Yeah.
Right. So what I hear you say is that these companies could do with more support in order to get this going. Could they actually be encouraged to participate via legislation? Do you think that's what's required here? New laws, perhaps?
Yeah, so when companies are encouraged to report something, we call this a voluntary disclosure in academic research. And in general, it doesn't work quite well, especially for critical issues like climate change. Why? Because companies that are successfully tackling climate change are more likely to report their progress. But then on the other hand, those companies that don't do too well, they just don't open their report, they don't report at all. So let's just like a teacher giving a homework to the class, right? So if the teacher told the class, it's up for the student to decide whether to do the optional homework or not. If I were the student who doesn't know how to answer those questions, of course I would skip them. So voluntary disclosure doesn't usually cut it. That's where the regulation, or what we call in the consultation paper, the kind of like mandatory disclosure comes into play. These mandatory exercise will actually help ensure everyone is actually doing their homework.
But what about the quality of the data that they provide at the same time? And it has to be transparent, it has to be accurate as well. Climate-related disclosures, we have seen greenwashing in some of these disclosures. Why should we have confidence that these recommendations for these companies to disclose is going to be any different?
Yeah, the main difference now is there are a couple of things going on. The first one is mandatory, and the second one is requiring external audit. So, by the way, referring to your question, I don't think mandatory climate change disclosure is like the one proposed in the consultation paper is actually driving greenwashing. Instead, I think mandatory climate change disclosure is actually a potential solution to tackle climate change. Mandatory climate change disclosure, where the numbers and statements are presented in a systematic, standardized format, actually, if they were audited, is actually an excellent fact-checking tool. So when companies are required to provide correct, auditable information about their environmental impact, they have less room to maneuver and make unsubstantiated claim about their green efforts. So this is really different from other voluntary disclosure that they have proposed in the past.
Well, we thank you for your insights on this. That was Associate Professor Kelvin Law from NTU's Nanyang Business School. Thank you.